So thank you so much for taking the time to join us for our webinar on creating an anti-racist childcare system in Canada. My name is Carolyn Ferns, and I'm the Public Policy Coordinator here at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. This webinar is part of an important project that the OCBCC has been leading for the past 3 years, funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada, on centering the voices of racialized mothers and educators in early learning and childcare policy. We're joined today by our project lead, Gabriela Cervantes, as well as leaders from our anti-racism working group and other community leaders from across the country who will be sharing details of projects that they have been leading on creating a more equitable childcare system for all. I'm going to first pass it over to working group member Sumaya Bobat to start the meeting in a good way with the land acknowledgement. Sumaya?
Thank you, Carolyn. My name is Sumaya Bobat. I am a registered early childhood educator. I go by the pronouns she, her. I want to begin by acknowledging the land I live on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I acknowledge that this territory is covered by Treaty 13. Regarding treaties, I reflect on the words of Tal Quinn, a Saddle Lake Cree Nation cultural teacher, traditional powwow dancer, and elder. The treaty that we have and all of the treaties in Canada have been broken promises. My grandparents emigrated from India to Zambia when they were very young. They were settlers in Zambia, and that is where my father was born. I was born in England, where my mother's side of the family resides. Being of Indian descent, but born in England, and living all of my childhood in Zambia, I continually tried to understand the negative impacts of British colonialism in both India and Zambia. As an immigrant and non-Indigenous person living in Canada for the past 14 years, I acknowledge that I must continuously build an understanding of the history and current reality of Indigenous people in the place where I now reside. I find a true sense of belonging in nature. As a child who was exposed to the outdoors from a very young age, my love for the land, plants, water, and animals makes me reflect on our relationships and connections with one another. I understand that as a settler on Turtle Island, I must learn the truth and respect the land I live on. I also realize that I have much to learn, and I now acknowledge that Indigenous education is holistic, differing from Western education. Therefore, it is my responsibility to be aware of and be respectful of these differences. My commitment lies first and foremost in educating myself to understand the history and current realities of how the settler colony of Canada impacts Indigenous people and the land. As I gain knowledge and understanding, I can better share my perspective with others and discuss colonialism, historical impacts, and ongoing oppression. This also brings awareness to what is happening right now. Speaking in muffled tones about injustice and unfairness will not lead us to freedom, peace, and equality. I imagine a world where everyone comes together in solidarity to work towards anti-oppression, anti-racism, and equity, taking strides toward reconciliation and decolonization as a community. But how can we achieve freedom when people are still being colonized, displaced, and oppressed here and around the world? I think of Nelson Mandela's speech from 1997, which he gave during the International Day of Solidarity, and I quote, "But we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. All of our struggles for freedom are connected." Thank you. I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda now. You're first going to hear from Gabriela and working group members who are going to share some of the outputs from the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare's project. Then we will have a panel discussion featuring 3 projects from across the country focused on making systemic change. That will be followed by a Q&A. Just to note, this session is in webinar mode. So you can place questions in the Q&A feature, and they will be asked to the panelists by our moderator. Then we'll have a short video presentation and wrap up our session. I'm going to pass the mic over to Adebola Adefioye to talk about the OCBCC's anti-racism project. Over to you, Adebola. Thank you so much.
You're muted, Adebola.
Yeah, thank you, Sumaya. My name is Adebola Adefioye. I'm a registered early childhood educator and the anti-racism project coordinator at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. I will briefly share an overview of the OCBCC's anti-racism project. We started the project in 2021 with a focus on centering the voices of racialized mothers and educators in shaping childcare response and recovery in Ontario. The project's objectives is to address systemic barriers by increasing networks and collaborations to accelerate systemic change and advance inclusive policies and practices to support racialized mothers, educators, and families. The project was implemented in 3 phases. In phase 1, we did a literature review and sector scan. In phase 2, we conducted community consultations in 7 key regions of Ontario and recruited 17 working group members who collaborated to conduct further research on the themes highlighted during the consultations. They also created program and policy recommendations for the Ontario government, childcare operators, and post-secondary. In phase 3, we started the dissemination of the key recommendations. We created fact sheets, we re-engaged community members, hosted MPP meetings, networking meetings in Ontario, and organized Canada-wide webinars. To learn more about the OCBCC's anti-racism project, please visit our website or send an email to Adebola or Kim Mantelak at adebola@childcareontario.org or kim@childcareontario.org. To discuss the recommendations that were co-created during the project, I'm going to pass the mic to 3 working group members to discuss some of the recommendations that resonate with them. First up is Tammy. Over to you, Tammy.
Kwe, hello, Tammy Nindigenous. My name is Tammy, and I'm a proud registered early childhood educator. I'm here today to share our highlights for government recommendations, and these are just a few. A key strategy is to meet the needs of our workforce. Our wage conditions are low, and we recommend a starting provincial salary to start at $30 an hour for registered early childhood educators, or RECEs, and $25 for non-RECE staff. Our dedicated early years staff are the backbone of our childcare centers and other environments. They are dedicated to adapting their programs and content to ensure they are meeting or exceeding equity, diversity, and inclusion for each family within their community, and they are wholeheartedly committed to continuous learning, embracing a growth mindset, and deserve to be paid as the early year professionals they are. Further, Ontario's developing access and inclusion framework being created for CWELC must include the voices of Black, Indigenous, and racialized groups and communities. This would secure the goal of childcare programs that are culturally safe, while also having the ability to service families regardless of race, language, immigration status, or ability. Quality representation matters. Our communities are diverse, which makes it imperative to equity and inclusion to have the voices, ideas, and needs of the entire community not only heard, but included within the new Ontario Access and Inclusion Framework. Thank you. Sorry, I would also like to introduce Herlene to move on. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Tammy, so much for sharing those core recommendations. I'm going to be focusing on post-secondary training and practice recommendations that came out from our working group. The first is anti-racism education and training. So pre-service programs where you have so many great candidates and potential and energy to do better, and our community should demonstrate a commitment to decolonize the program and enact the principles of anti-racism, anti-oppression, the truth and reconciliation calls to action. This would look like a mandatory course on anti-racist, anti-oppressive practice, course instructors that reflect the diversity of knowledges and communities that embody our spaces, and course materials reflective of Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities. There is so much rich culture and learning from various communities to embed in early years. The other recommendation that came out is paid placements. Many of our project participants identified that paid field placements would make training programs more accessible and demonstrate a commitment to decent work standards, that all labor should be compensated, especially when much of that labor is feminized labor. The other core recommendation was pathways to credentials. So increase accessibility to pre-service programs by recognizing a variety of pathways to credentials for international students, apprenticeships, and bridging programs. This information should be made easily accessible through a range of entry points. Thank you so much. I'm going to be passing it over to Denise, another working group member.
Thank you, Arlene. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Donaldson, and I'm a registered early childhood educator and working group member on this project. There are so many recommendations I can speak to, but today I will be focusing on a few recommendations under the childcare operators section. In order to create an anti-racist childcare system, we need to prioritize training opportunities that include all levels of our organizations. Anti-racism training needs to be ongoing and supported by policy. We need to take an active stance to decolonize our programs and have a firm understanding of what anti-racism is. This quote by Ijoma Oluo has helped me with this work, and I find it fitting to share today. The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to pretend to be free of racism to be anti-racist. Anti-racism is the commitment to fight racism wherever you find it, including in yourself. And it's the only way forward. As operators, we need to take a look not only at ourselves, but our teams, our curriculum, our children and families we support, and take responsibility for how and where we hold beliefs that need actionable change. A culturally safe program provides an environment that is free of racism and discrimination, where Black, Indigenous, and racialized children, families, and staff feel safe and valued, where their being is affirmed and is visible. Thank you for listening. I'm now going to turn it over to Bernice, who will be leading our panel discussion.
Hi, thank you, Denise. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bernice Cipriani-McLeod. I am a registered early childhood educator, and I am the director of the School of Early Childhood at George Brown College. So I have the pleasure of moderating the panel discussion. We have three panelists. Just a little bit more about me. I've been chairing the anti-racism working group, and today I'm pleased to introduce three different projects that have been happening across Canada to create a more equitable childcare system. I'm going to have two questions for each of the panelists, but first I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves.
I can go first. My name is Gabriela Cervantes. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm joining from the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Coast Salish nations, including Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. And I'm joining today kind of presenting the Inclusive Childcare for All project led by Oxfam Canada. And I'm very happy to talk more about what we have done and what else can we do to achieve an anti-racist system.
Thank you. Sanzida, you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sanzida Habib. My pronouns are she, her. And I work at PIRS, Pacific Immigrant Resources Society. And the project we'll be talking about, the name is Building a Childcare System that Works for Immigrant and Refugee Women. And it's based in BC. So I'm joining from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Coast people. In particular, where I'm joining from, this is a territory of multiple nations, including Katsi, Semiahmoo, and Kwantlen nations. And interestingly, the previous speaker, Gabriela, she also worked on the project for some time. Yeah, thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And Margaret, I'll just ask you to briefly introduce yourself and then we'll go into the questions.
Hi, my name is Margaret and I'm joining from BC, New Westminster City. And I was in CLG, that is PRC, with Sanzida, that is in group 2. And I'm happy to be here too. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your introduction. So Sanzida,
Bernice, we also have Sultana joining us. Who has introduced herself.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Thank you. Sultana?
Yeah, my name is Sultana Jahangir. I've been working with South Asian Women's Rights Organization since it started journey as an organization. And SAWIS is a long-term advocate for childcare work and childcare accessibility for low-income and racialized immigrant women. Our demand is full funding for low-income women childcare subsidy since we started an organization 2008, and we work with other stakeholders in here, Ontario Coalition of Better Childcare, and other stakeholders together to raise the concern and the needs for the inclusive childcare for South Asian, all the racialized immigrant women. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry I missed you there. I'm moving along. Got this time clock in my head to try and make sure we stay on target. Sanzida, I'm going to go back to you and I'm going to ask you, what makes your project special?
Well, thank you for asking, Bernice. So as I mentioned, the name of the project is Building a Childcare System that Works for Immigrant and Refugee Women, which indicates that it doesn't work for us racialized immigrant women, right? That's why the project started. So it's a 2.5 year long initiative taken by PIRS, Pacific Immigrant Resources Society. It is funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada. So it mainly supports a feminist response and recovery from the impacts of COVID-19 through systemic change in the childcare sector. So this work has been done with an approach of creating system thinking. So looking at the bigger picture, the holistic picture, the complexities and interconnections of the childcare system with the multiple other issues and systems. So we have built relationships and worked with policymakers, community leaders, and many other important stakeholders. But really, the project is all about bringing together racialized immigrant and refugee women with lived experiences with the childcare system. So these are women from diverse immigration, settlement, and cultural backgrounds who come together to explore further, dissect and understand the intersectional barriers in the childcare sector. And then they work together to co-design, co-develop solutions. So we consider the racialized women as the experts of their lives, right? Of their own lives. However, many immigrant and refugee women, including migrant worker on work permit, newcomers, and they're most often quite isolated and feel lost in a new country and culture where they feel they don't quite belong. So we convened and trained 3 different cohorts in the past 2.5 years. And a total of 51 racialized women have completed the program, which is basically a 20-week long curriculum. that covers the topics of intersectionality, system change, policy formation, and also honing some practical skills like advocacy, storytelling, public speaking, developing campaigns, etc. So basically the focus is on system thinking, advocacy, and advocacy skill building for taking action. So we use trauma-informed approach basically to create a safe, inclusive, and non-judgmental space for the racialized women to come together, to bond together, and co-develop solutions. We create and share platforms with these women to share our voices, stories, concerns, and solutions. So for the same reason, this is what we do. We have invited one of our program participants, Margaret, who will be sharing her perspectives and expertise and solutions towards creating a system, childcare system that is informed by anti-racism principles. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, let's ask Margaret then to share what, for you, Margaret, was the most important experience or recommendation or learning that came from this project?
Okay, thank you so much. As for me, because I'm a single mom with 3 kids, because I came here when I was pregnant, I was due 19 days, and I experienced a lot of things as a mother who is minority, because I can tell myself as a minority, because when I landed in Canada, I don't know anyone. So the thing is, I faced a lot because I was discriminated in the childcare system due to the way that I was. Because I was pregnant by that time, and also I'm Black, and also I gathered the information that I had to be discriminated. That is because of I'm a single mom. And through that, the CLG with the group that I was in, it has helped me to understand my right of the anti-Black racism in childcare system, which they help us to get our rights, and they had us, like they help us and teach us how to do to express ourselves, and to know that we have the rights and we have the voices, which has helped me also to engage in schools, which the work that I'm doing through the CAN Community Action Network, to pass the voices, to help the other kids in schools also to know, even if they're immigrants, they have their rights, they have their voices to be heard due to the way that there is discrimination even in schools. So through the LCG, with the Sanzida, it helps me to understand and to have the voice and to pass out the voice and to advocate about the childcare system, which we have done. And I'm very glad because of the group that I was in, because it also helped us even to understand ourselves by helping what we're gonna do in our lives. That is for creating us pathways. And through that, I was elected into advisory committee in the city of New Westminster to advocate about the childcare. It helps us to stand even to the decision makers and to tell them this is what we need as a Black community, as a people with different colors and different languages. This is what we need. We don't need like the way that it has been discrimination through the way that you have to be discriminated because you don't know how to speak in English. Because others, we came here with different, in our group, I experienced that, I got and I had that experience, it's like every person has a second language. Maybe some of them, they don't know how to speak in English. Through the group, it has helped us also to understand English. And that is another thing that we have recommended the group to still exist. And also, it is a part of our healing. Because when you come into this place, maybe you came through in too many ways. Some in the work permit, some came through like refugees, some as visitors, some as work permit. So it helps us now to heal, because when that is what I believe. I believe in exchanging our stories. I call them lived expertise. Because when we come together and we share our stories, it helps us to heal mentally. Because some of us, like for me, I came here because I'm a victim of torture. And when I joined the group and shared with the mom, because we felt when you come here, you feel like you are isolated. So I came here and I joined the other moms, and we discuss and we exchange our stories and become as a result. And what I believe it's called change. Because when I tell you my story, you tell me your story, we exchanging conversation, and that's what we come with the result of change. And also I have learned about the form of government, how the government works, because I don't want to pass the voices where the platform that I don't know all, maybe that the platform that is where I'm not supposed to be. So they have helped us also to engage in the government and to help us to understand how the government works. And also they help us to stand up for ourselves. Through the CLG, it has helped me to be a public speaker and also a woman activist in childcare, housing, and also in schools. It has been there for us, and I can advocate that this is a group that we need. This is a group that has made us the way we are, and we are very grateful to be in this platform too. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Margaret. Very powerful, really capture a lot of the essence of what has been shared by Sanzida in terms of the project. I'm going to now go over to Sultana and ask you to share, what's been special about your project.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity, Barney. South Asian Women's Rights Organization start in the community that are most disadvantaged and most racialized and marginalized. We address from very beginning the exclusion and marginalization. So since 2008, we start to raise the women's leadership and raise the voice of the living experience people. So lived experience, that I totally agree with Margarita and also Sanzida, that giving the community more knowledge that how they can solve the problem. Those who have the problem, they own the solution. So, but their voice is not listening by anyone. So like through this project that we run in Feminist Response and Recovery Project, and that's a project, our goal is to, raise the living experience and unique and complex barriers that our community face during the pandemic, before the pandemic. So totally is the feminist response and recovery agenda that we are working through this project. We engage 30 women leaders, and the beauty of this project is 253 women who participate total project to let us know what is the lived experience and how they impacted by the pandemic. So there is a multi-dimensional pandemic impact. We find it out through this discussion. And the women impacted with lots of ways: employment, income, housing, childcare, gender-based violence. So all together, totally destroy their social determinant of health. So this impact one of the childcare. SORO has been working long time with the childcare issue since it started the organization. Our main goal is full funding for low-income women childcare subsidy, because we know that childcare subsidy is, if it's not available for the women, that they are not capable to access it. So when the government talked about the universal childcare and attached it to the economy of the Canada, we find it out that $10 a day childcare might be going to be impossible for some of the low and no income people. So our SORO's women leader, they're sitting together, discussing together to find it out what kind of message we should send it. So immediately we send a message to every stakeholder that we really need, still need a low-income women full funding for the subsidy. And we work with other stakeholders. And during this period, we also find it out that even though like women are looking for childcare, and also women, those who are working in the childcare sector, they bring their precarious knowledge about the childcare job and find it out that the total job is become kind of contractual and Uber nanny type of job. So women raise their concern that how we can make it a decent job, because this employment is women driven. So our women leaders sit down with the other stakeholders, sit down with the policymaker and political, still continue, try to convince them, try to influence them, and try to let them understand that you walk a mile with my shoe and find it out how hard for my life to live without the childcare support and also work as a precarious childcare worker. So we are trying to raise the concern about two ways. The childcare is a decent job. We should make this childcare job more decent for the women with all kind of, it should be a real job. It's not going to be kind of Uber job or and not going to pay below their poverty wage. So minimum wage is a poverty wage. We want that it should has to be bring the living wage for all the childcare workers. Same times we continue raise our concern to put the special free childcare for the women, those who are no and low income. So both of the things we find it out that we need some kind of political support for these things. It's possible, it's doable, because childcare is not income, it's kind of investment. It will going to give more women to enter in the labor market, and each of the times they become the social capital. So these are the work we are working during this pandemic period. We did lots of events. We have lots of skits, drama that we made it to let other stakeholders, let other person understand that what kind of intersectionality women face it, how they get excluded from the system, how they fall through by the service crack. So all the policy program practices that need to be changed, that we raise the concern through this division during the project. I'm sorry I did not bring any kind of example, but I just want to say that one of the things that when women feel so helpless together when they come, I totally agree with them, Margaret, sharing their pain and sharing their lived experience, they feel kind of inclusive unity, and they start to raise their concern that our life should not be like this. So these are the mechanism we use it, and our main goal is like somehow women should have to be sit down in the decision making table, and the decision should have to be taken by them, and that part is long way to go, but still we are working. So like Sorrow, then Sanzida's group, Ontario Coalition Better Childcare, and other group together, we need to become united together and push it, because until these women, those who are affected by the issue, are not taking the decision and the policy reform, any kind of decision will not going to be impact their life, because a solution should have to come from them. So that all these sets of recommendations that we have to make the childcare job in a decent job, and make the childcare more accessible and inclusive for the low income and no income people is our demand, and we want to carry this demand to the stakeholder table, to the decision making table, and also take a role as a leader in that table to take the decision that how we can reform the policy program practice that could be reflect our needs. And we are going to move forward. Total things is advancing gender equality. Until you are not helping us, we are not going to be proceeded. Until we are not taking decision, the solution not going to impact us. Thank you. I think I proceed across the time.
Thanks, Sultana. I appreciate your passion. And you're right, as I think about what I heard, I've been making some notes. There's some overarching kind of themes around systems change, a collaborative approach, and it's evident about the necessity of hearing the voices of these women and families, as we did today with Margaret, who shared her very compelling story, and how healing that is, and creating this sense of community, this movement building, as women share their stories about discrimination, the trauma, the struggles, but you can hear how we lift the voices, and there's a sense of hope and optimism as we come together to collaborate and think about how we make changes in the system together, right? And that it can't be just one voice, one approach, that this is a multi-pronged approach that really is centered in the voices and experience of those who have to, live this journey day in and day out. And then it means thinking about political will and political responsibilities, building all of this. So thanks for sharing. So I guess to summarize, one last question is going back to Gabriela's thinking about, what are the lessons learned? What are the recommendations that you think are really important for us to consider?
Thank you for the question, Bernice. I think in terms of our project with Oxfam Canada, we aren't in the front lines like PIRS or SAWIS. I don't know if that's how to pronounce. I'm sorry, Sultana. But I think what we have done, and we have been very successful in, is kind of laying the foundation of merging lived experience with research and kind of producing that evidence that will lead to evidence-based policy making. So through our project, we have partnered with Childcare Now and Canada, CRRU, Canadian, sorry, I'm blanking out on the name right now, the Childcare Resource and Research Unit, to basically put together the policy recommendations on how to build a more inclusive childcare system. So Oxfam Canada in May 2023 convened over 90 advocates, parents, and educators across Canada during the Inclusive Childcare for All Summit. And their recommendations were included in this research paper. So I think the biggest learning from this project, as I said, has been laying out that foundation, that research, that we are working very hard to make it accessible to childcare advocates. So we also launched a campaign called Where's Childcare, when we have very direct call to actions for advocates to participate, and also created resources for them to use in their advocacy. So I think just after hearing my colleagues here, the biggest learning from this project and for Oxfam Canada, I think, is that the process of systems change is challenging to implement, that systems change requires everyone to think and act differently, to confront the root causes of inequities in the childcare system, and that we need to transform the structures, our mindsets, the power dynamic, and the flow of resources within the childcare movement as well. So the advocacy, I guess, for Oxfam Canada has been mostly to advance and move forward the expansion of public and not-for-profit childcare. We know that, well, access doesn't equal inclusion. It's the first step to ensure that everyone, it's the first step to inclusion, I will say. And then, of course, there's much more to do and much more stakeholders to work with to achieve true inclusion, but that's definitely the first step. We see that racialized newcomers, low income, and households with low education are overall less represented in any type of childcare across Canada. So I guess the focus right now, it's really on as we build the childcare system, making sure that, first of all, there's enough access, and work with stakeholders to ensure that at the same time, we're taking an intersectional approach in policymaking. So, for example, if we're thinking about expansion of childcare, how can we ensure that the rollout prioritizes historically marginalized groups, and so on. So, yeah, as I said, I think as part of the childcare movement, really emphasize systems change approach, making sure that, for example, members of the community like Margaret, that we create more democratic engagement in our process inside the childcare movement, of course, in policy making as well. And as Sanzida mentioned, I worked with PIRS before, and I think there's a lot of learnings that can come out of that. Just, for example, the way the childcare movement can outreach the community. I think that's something that we need to do more, as well as policymakers. How can we increase outreach to communities? How can we work hand by hand with them? And that means changing the mindset. And that means like, how do we communicate with community? It takes, for example, understanding that the group of people that we work with may work on, late at night, and they may need some flexibility in when we host meetings. It might mean that, that capacity building part where people might need more support in public speaking, or they might need more support in understanding how policy works in Canada. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, but I think it systems change. It's essential, I think, to change the way that we work. And as we build this childcare system, I think that's what it takes to really question the way that we've been doing things so far, and how are we moving forward in a truly inclusive childcare system.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. I really appreciate that, Gabriela. What amazing work everyone's been doing. Really appreciate you sharing your stories. So if we have a few minutes, I'm going to open it up to the questions from participants. So feel free to put questions into the Q&A feature, and then we'll get them to the panelists. I see there's been a few that have been populated. And then at this point, Carolyn, do you want to take it over, or would you like?
I can read out some. I can read out some questions. Unless if you can open the Q&A, feel free, Bernice, to just pull out some questions that you're seeing.
Okay. I think I can.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
Thank you. All right. So one of the questions: how can the childcare sector as a whole better promote equity, diversity, inclusion within policies, programs, and services? Yeah, great question. And I guess that's really the aim of these various projects, is to really think about how, as we said, we build systems, and thinking about it at the pre-service level in terms of what's made available to students, in terms of preparing them for entry into the field, to think about how we equip them and provide them with the knowledge and understanding. Thinking about then what happens for operators, and that has to do then with legislation. So again, we're seeing a multi-pronged approach, right? So there's got to be some legislation, regulations in place. There's got to be funding, and we recognize that this can't fall on the shoulders of operators alone, supervisors, that there's got to be support resources made available. And then we're thinking about how we build capacity and do some movement building. As we've heard various people share their knowledge, expertise, and their perspectives. So to promote, better promote equity, diversity, inclusion. Yeah, I mean, there's not a silver bullet. It's not one silver or one straight answer. There's not one singular approach. It's multifaceted and comes with various stakeholders being involved, and providing guidance, lived expertise, policymakers, folks who are involved in research and policy development. I don't know if any of the panelists want to answer any of that. Sultana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Margaret, you want to go? Okay. The Michael thinks like the question already mentioned that something is broken. So looks like that total system get broken. So only the solution is rebuild it. Rebuild it in a way so it will be equity, diversions, inclusiveness, all together it's come. So then everyone can be rescued by the system ambulance. Because this system ambulance that is coming cannot rescue the people because of the systemic barrier that excluded the people. So our concern is we have to eliminate this barrier. That means we have to restructure again this thing. So all together we can work together to influence these things, because system built by human. So we are the human. We need to be reactivate again to build a new system. So that only way to work together is the solution, and it is not done in a day. So we need lots of effort, lots of support, lots of resources to ongoing way to, because we are working against the flow. So it's to make the flow for us or favoring us, we have to change it, and that change need to be done if we all work together.
Thanks, Sultana. There's another question about are there best practices that are currently in operation? I think there's many examples of various programs and centers that are doing some really good work. Off the top of my head, I know that in our George Brown Lab Schools that we're doing a lot of training with our staff. We're doing it in pre-service. We have a course on anti-racism that all students are taking. We've been offering workshops that students, again, mandatory students must take. In our lab schools, colleagues, Gail Hunter, Shawnee Hardware have been providing support and training to various folks. We've been making a concerted effort about ensuring that we have more racialized Black, Indigenous educators, and I'm sure some of the other institutions are doing similar. Again, in the interest of time, there's a question that I think is also worth spending some time with, and I'll ask the panelists. So one of the questions is, what supports would, and I'm going to tie it to another question because I think they're connected. So one of the questions is, what supports would you recommend for folks in the center that are being silenced when they advocate for themselves and other educators? And then, there's another question which I think ties to that is, there's a Black male REC states that he experiences the problems of anti-racism, the persistent under-evaluation of the EC sector, and the labor provided by the nearly all-female workforce can be traced back to its racist roots when enslaved Black women were forced to care for white children. And he's provided a reference. And so it's thinking about, how do you do this work? There was a question about burnout. How do you continue to do this work and not be burnt out by doing this on top of all your other work? When there needs to be a voice, you need to share your voice. What do you do with that? So I'll ask one of the panelists to maybe respond to that, or a couple panelists to respond to that question, or those questions that I've tied together.
I can just answer that. The thing is, like for me, because I face a lot, I remember that there is a time even I was asked by one of the staffs, like in front of my kids, that there is no daycare for the Black people. And I remember, because I was pregnant, the second daughter asked me, I wish, Mom, you're gonna give birth to a white child, because you have faced this a lot. And what I understand about that, and what I always does, and what I can always advocate, it's about to provide diversity training for the staffs, because that thing helped me when I just are trying to advocate about the childcare system. I always talk about my lived experience, because that's what I faced. Because I can imagine, I always say that speak to me over freedom when you fit into my tight shoes, because that is what I always advocate about the training of the staffs, to provide diversity training, use inclusive teaching strategies, because that is what I passed through. That is my lived experience. So when I'm advocating about this is what it give me that strength to advocate and to stand out and to get to help the community to pass out their voices so that we can be heard. That is what I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know, Bernice, if I can quickly add, I think for the first question, what supports would you recommend for folks in the sector? I think this is what we need to do better, just making sure that everyone can feel included in the childcare movement. So really building coalitions, finding kind of like your support group as a childcare advocate, and just kind of talking about how to avoid, well, not avoid burnout, but how can we move towards better working conditions. I think it's important to highlight that most of the as they said in the chat, most of the workforce, it's comprised of women, but also women with an immigrant background, which are most likely racialized. We don't really have much data. We don't have data on race. So yeah, when we talked about, implementing wage grids, they also need to take into account the barriers for most of these women to achieve certifications, ACE certifications, and to kind of be able to get a formal education or the credentials being recognized here in Canada. So it takes, I think, again, as I said, a systemic approach to understand also who is the workforce, and taking an intersectional approach to that too, and ensuring that they are receiving fair wages, and making sure that they also receive better working conditions.
Thanks, Gabrielle. And I'll just jump in for a moment, and then I see Sultana and Sanzida have their hand up, and then we'll have to, I think, in the interest of time, wrap up the questions. But I mean, in the recommendations, we also talk about the fact that it's necessary that Black, Indigenous, racialized educators who are doing this work are also receiving necessary supports to, avoid burnout, and to, the re-traumatization that happens every time you have to share your story and you have to convince others that this is important. So we recognize we need mentors, we need leaders who are supporting us to do this work. We need to ensure that we have allies so that this work doesn't fall on our shoulders alone to carry these messages forward, that it's important that there are allies who recognize their role and the necessity of this work, so that we're not constantly trying to convince people, convince the sector that this work is necessary. So I think that's also, what's really important for me to state. Sanzida and then Sultana, do you want to add anything?
Yes, Bernice, you kind of pointed out what I was going to say, that it is, as Gabriela said, the system change is not a sprint, right? It's a long marathon, and we have to take care of ourselves. We have to create healing spaces, as Margaret was referring to, right? And we need to fall back on each other's shoulder. We cannot do it alone. It is, colonization, what Sumaya's land acknowledgement really resonated. I loved it. It's beautiful. The kind of self-reflection that I saw there, right? We need that constantly. And, we need to lift each other up and build allyship, as you mentioned, Bernice. Decolonize our minds, starting from ourselves, right? Decolonize the system, practice decolonizing processes. Women's work has always been undervalued, but someone at our event yesterday was saying that people say, we don't know who said it, but somebody said that childcare is not rocket science. It's harder than rocket science. It is much harder than rocket science. So let's keep pushing this. Like, it's not easy. It's very complicated. And actually, probably, I truly believe that it starts from decolonizing process. Like, when we start valuing women, when we start valuing care work can be done by men too. My husband is very caring, much more caring than myself, honestly. So we need to share all these stories again, right? That care work is important, no matter who does it, right? Racialized women, racialized men, it always comes on the shoulder of marginalized people. Nobody wants to do care work, but it is the most important work. And the other thing I want to share is Canada, we are here, racialized immigrant, refugee women, we are here because Canada needs us. Canada depends on racialized immigrant women to produce the future generation. right? And we are just left on our own to take care of our children. We can't do it alone. So
thank you, Sanzida. Appreciate that. Thanks for sharing. So in the interest of time, we've got 4 minutes and we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So I'm just going to flip it back to you, Carolyn, and I again appreciate your responses to all the questions.
So thank you so much to all the panelists. That was such a great conversation. A big thank you. So we just want to quickly share a video that was made specially for today by OCBCC's placement student Shamar King-Hugart. I think that, yeah, Amber's got the link up there. So this just reviews our project. Thanks.
The Anti-Racism Project is important because it highlights the systemic barriers present within our childcare system and calls childcare partners to action to address them. The project is significant because the issues were highlighted and the recommendations were created by racialized educators and mothers, offering a key perspective often absent in similar initiatives where the recommendations are typically created by those unaffected by the issues at hand. Another significant point that sets this project apart is its emphasis on systemic change, shifting the responsibility from individuals to organizations and governments. While changes in individual practices can yield positive outcomes, systemic changes possess the potential for far-reaching impacts on children and families.
As an international student who is uncertain of what the future holds, I dedicate my time here in Ontario to ensure quality anti-racist childcare environments and to raising the work conditions of early childhood education by advocating and supporting this project. As students, let us join the movement because our voices matter in this campaign. This is not just for the children and families we work hand in hand with, but for us, future educators.
I think that this project was really important, and what resonated most with me was the community building aspect. In the beginning of the project, we brought together so many diverse voices and so many diverse experiences, and people were really, really vulnerable in their sharing, and it brought the community together like I've never seen before.
I strongly believe this project is very important because it was designed to amplify the voices of racialized mothers and educators, and the project has also offered many of us the opportunity to strengthen our leadership and advocacy interest and to directly use the skills in the facilitation of community forums, networking meetings, MP and MPP educationals as we continue to disseminate the program and policy recommendations developed on the project.
Thank you so much, everybody. And, you know, I think we feel like we could have 2 hours at least for this webinar today. So I feel terrible wrapping it up now, but I'm going to hand it over to Jess to wrap up. But first, I just want to give one more big thank you to everybody today, all our panelists, working group members, and especially to Adebola, who led this project over the past 3 years with such heart and strategy and dedication and flexibility. So thank you so much, everybody. And I'm going to pass it over to Jess.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. As this webinar comes to a close, my name is Jess Tomas. I'm a registered early childhood educator as well as a working group member. I want to call attention to all of you here today. And remember, on a Tuesday in March, over 200 people came together to transform society and ourselves. And remember, you are not alone in this work. I'm so proud of the OCBCC Wage Working Group, as well as Adebola and all of the participants in creating these recommendations. It's not easy work, and the generosity in which folks shared their personal experiences and support for each other will have a long-lasting impact on the early years sector, and personally myself as well. As an ECE, I understand how this critical work translates to safe learning environments for children and families. But I want to also highlight a theme that I've seen here today as well as throughout this project. This work has the potential to heal generations. I did not have access to culturally safe pedagogy as a child, but today My inner child is absolutely beaming at the potential for an anti-racist early learning system in Canada. While this project invited me in to be consulted and to make sure the voices of racialized educators and mothers were being heard, it also gave me a soft place to land. I only wish spaces like this weren't so far and few between. I was vulnerable in this project because I was safe. I was emotional because I was cared for. I was confident because I was encouraged, and I was brave because I was ready. Through the implementation of our recommendations, we are ensuring that children receive the support they deserve, and I couldn't be more excited to see all children recognize their own vulnerability, emotion, confidence, and bravery, because we built a world that celebrates them authentically. Please stay connected and let us know how you use these recommendations to advocate for an anti-racist childcare system in Canada. And thank you again for joining today.